Okay, so we now pretty much have our main effects set up. We have our volume builder, which is going to be our metal block that's cutting out or being cut out. And then we have these metal shavings, which are spawning in the place of where our current cutout is happening. So the effect is pretty much set up. We just now need to add our final touches to actually make this kind of all come together and actually sell the effect. So to begin with, I actually want to add a kind of red light that is in the place of the cutout, which kind of not like, I guess it's kind of like a laser. I guess you could think of it as like a laser or some kind of heat that's like cutting away at the metal. I'm not entirely sure, it's just kind of what I went with, and I quite liked it. So what I did was, in the place of the cylinder field again, so with the cylinder field selected, I went to area light, and holding control I dropped in an area light, and I will control drag this constraint tag onto the light now, which we used before on the basic emitter to basically parent it to the cylinder field. So now with that area light selected, I'm going to resize that and probably change it to a disc. So let's go back into the area light, area shape, disc, and then let's rotate that to face down. And I can probably bring that down as well. And let's change the spread so it's pretty low, and then we can change the color to red. Now I kind of want this to be blinking, so the way I might do this is I'll use my exposure to actually activate when the light turns on, and then I'll use the intensity to just be constantly blinking, using that same kind of oscillating effect I used for the cylinder field moving up and down. So what I'll do is go to frame 24, I'll set the exposure to -10, so it's off, and then I'll go forward to 25 and I'll turn it back to 0, so we've turned it on. And then back on frame 24, I'll figure out a good intensity. What I'll do is add a keyframe on the intensity, go forward maybe 2 frames, drop the intensity down to like 8, so it's not completely off, it's just kind of getting weaker. And let's open up our curve editor, and let's select our lights, intensity, and yeah, let's highlight both those keyframes, go to track, go to functions, track after, and then we'll do oscillate after. So now our light should just be blinking. If I turn off our particle emitter and our cloner, hopefully we can get a quicker playback. It looks like it's not really going that much faster anymore, but there is a slight blinking going on. It might be hard to see, but the light is blinking. So I might, on my curves, so when it gets more intense, maybe I'll make that bit feel sharper, so it's all of a sudden, and then I might just drag the lower level out a bit, so it's kind of like pulsating, I guess. But it's going to be kind of hard to see the effect in the viewport. It'll be more prominent in the final render. But once we have the rest of our lights set up, we can take another look at that light, this red light, to make sure it's all working properly. I'm going to drag that into my lights folder, and I'll turn everything back on. Okay, so for the material of the metal block, I went over to Ambient CG and found this nice metal material. This is Metal 51A, so feel free to go ahead over to Ambient CG. They have loads of great free materials, and then you can just search up metal, and yeah, and you can find this one if you want, or if you find a different one you like, feel free to go ahead and grab that. I downloaded the 4K PNG version, whatever you think your PC can handle. I don't think you need to go to 8K, but if you really want to, that's not a problem. Go ahead and do that. But once you've downloaded that, we want to go ahead and set up our metal block material. And from that download folder, you want to drag in your color, metal, roughness, and normal. I've gone for the normal GL. I don't know if the DX version works in Cinema. I always just use GL. But these are the four maps I used from my download. So I'll hook up the color, metal, roughness, and then we'll spawn in a bump map, hook that up, and change the input map type to tangent space normal, and plug in the bump map. Now that's done, we can drag and drop that onto our metal block, and it's not going to work immediately the way we were intending it to. And I can show you that if we preview this. If I bring in, although it's kind of hard to see, but you get the idea. It's not really behaving the way that we want it to. So the method I decided to use for this tutorial was camera projection mapping. So what we'll do for that is drop in a camera, and we'll get into the view of it. I'll turn up the focal length, maybe all the way up, and bring the camera up, rotate it down 90 degrees, looking directly down on the block. Doesn't really matter if it's in view or not. This is going to be used for our projection mapping. So inside our metal block material that's on our volume measure, if we select that, we can go to projection, change that to camera mapping, and then we have this camera slot here, which we can drop in our new camera, and we can change the aspect ratio to square. And we should now, if we kind of enable our render preview, although it's going to be hard to see with the lights, you can see we're now, I'm going to change my resolution quick. I'm going to go to my 4K version so we can see this a bit better. But you can see now we're just projecting this metal material over the top face of our block. So now if we move the camera, if we grabbed that camera we're using for the mapping and we change the Y position, you can see the closer we get, the more dense it's getting, and the further we move it away, the closer we get onto that material. So we can kind of find that sweet spot that we like, which I think somewhere around here is kind of where I ended up in my examples. Maybe a little bit more. I think something like this looks really nice, and we can get some really nice close-up detailing of this metal. It looks really nice, I think. Now the only problem with this material, I don't know if it's just this specific type of the way that the metal kind of, this style of this stretch metal, I guess, is the way the light interacts with it. You can see the card now is super overexposed because I have turned up the brightness quite a bit, but it kind of behaves differently with the metal. So what I might do is create two different versions of the lights, one for the card and the shavings, the metal shavings, and then one for the block metal. So I'll find the correct lighting. I'm just focusing on the metal block right now. I just want to find the kind of level of the light, like how bright I want it to be. I guess I should probably frame my camera now as well. So making sure we're in our correct camera, we'll change the focal length to 120, and let's frame this up to something like this. This looks nice. And yeah, let's adjust that light to a point that we're happy with. Again, not focusing on the card, don't worry about that. Just trying to find something that feels correct and also is complementary to this metal material, which I think this is already kind of kind of getting there. Now what I'll do is create the copy of this light that's going to be for the card and the metal shavings. So what we'll do, I'll rename this one to main block light, and I'll name this one to card plus shavings, and I'll put main at the start of that as well. So this main block light will go to project, and we'll do include, and we'll eyedrop our volume measure, and then we'll go to main card plus shavings, change that to include as well, and then we'll eyedrop our metal card and our cloner, because that's where our shavings are. And what we can do, we can adjust those light settings now. We can turn that intensity right down to something that feels correct. I guess the problem with this is that the inside of the metal getting cut out is really bright, so it's creating this kind of highlighted rim. So we might need to do a bit more adjusting. What I'm going to do is pause this for now, and I'm going to build the rest of the scene, which all I did was add a second block. So let's go back to the start. I'm just going to right click on the volume measure, and I'm going to click connect objects, and I'll just take off the collider tag. We don't need that. And I'm going to move this down below our first block, and I'm going to rotate it. And let's just make sure that that's close enough. So yeah, I'll give it a little bit more rotation. And then I want to add in a floor, so I'll add in a plane, and I'll bring that down, and I'll expand that. And this can be our ground. And I'll disable the work plane, don't need that. I'll go back into my camera, and let's see how this looks. So our lights, of course, they're not interacting with any of the new bits that we've added in. So what we could do is, in our main block light, we'll go to project, and we'll add in our volume measure.1, which is our block that's underneath. And then in our main card plus shavings, maybe we could add our floor, and we could probably add our volume measure.1 as well. Yeah, which helps ground this. Now you can see it with our effect setup. Our metal shavings are still green. I think they're inheriting the particle color. So what we need to do is, for the particle group, first thing we can do is disable in the render view, and then for the cloner of our shavings, we can either just drop in our metal block material. We could just drop that onto the cloner if you want, and that will give them a metal material. Or if you want to find a different metal material, like something I think like stretched metal, that could look quite nice on these pieces. But feel free to experiment, see what you like most. I think this doesn't look too bad. I would like to fix this red light as well. I think let's come out of our camera. Let's lock this one to our main camera, and I'm going to make this smaller, I think, and maybe the spread can soften out, but then I'll just keep making it smaller, somewhere around there. Soften it a little bit more. I think something around that level looks good. And then that's going to be, that's going to be blinking as it chips away our metal. Now, I'm not quite liking that it's still really bright in this area. I just don't think it looks quite right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the main card plus shavings light into the main block light, so it's a child, because then I can move them together. So I'm going to move this over and down a little bit, kind of to this point. So right now it's looking a little bit weird, but when I grab the main block light and drop the intensity down, but then drop the spread down, we should be able to find a decent level. Maybe make it even sharper, then up the intensity. I think somewhere around there is good. And then on the main card plus shavings, this can actually, what I might do for this one is make this longer, thinner, and yeah, you can see creates kind of a nice dramatic light across the block. Let's just kind of fine tune these parameters. Can make this a bit more thin, and then up the spread a bit, and then the intensity maybe can go up a bit more. I think something like that looks good. And I think I might add a second light from this angle. I'll drop in another area light, and I'll move this over to this side. I'll control drag my target tag onto that light. This is just, if you right click on your light, go to animation, target, and then inside that you can drop in an object. I've just used a null, and you can drop that into this target and the light will point towards it. So yeah, you can just move that null around and the lights will change where they're facing. So I'm going to position this somewhere around this kind of way. I'll keep it low, and it doesn't need to be too intense. Just something to maybe actually make this a lot wider. Bring the intensity down. It's a lot of fine tuning to something. So like if I turn this off now, see if it's making much of a difference. It's just highlighting this area a little bit more, so it's not completely dark. But I think this is at quite a nice level right now. I'll just do a playthrough to see how the effect's actually looking. And I'm quite happy with this. I reckon I might up the size of those metal shavings to 0.15, just so they're a little bit bigger. And to speed things up, you definitely could cache this scene. So I'll go ahead and cache that. And one last thing we need to do is make sure that our red light turns off after our cutout is finished. So we know that at frame 179 our cutout finishes, so we can add a keyframe on the exposure here, and we can go forward to 180 and turn that exposure off and add another keyframe. And now our red lights will stop after the cutout finishes. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do is add my two different cameras. So we've got the one already set up, and then I want a nice close-up when we're about a third to halfway through of cutting out this block. I kind of want to cut to a close-up just to see how it looks close up with some nice depth of field. And then after a brief moment, we'll cut back to our first camera. So I'll control drag our current camera, and I'll call this B camera, and we'll go into that, and I want to position this a lot closer, and we'll leave it there for the moment. Let's go back to our first camera, and what I'm going to do is, with my camera folder selected, or it doesn't really matter, but all I want to do is drop in a null in the center of the world. I'm going to just move it into my camera folder, and I'll call this camera target 1, and I'll create a second one because I think I'm going to have to use 2 for this. And For our first camera, I'm going to right click, animation tag, target tag, and I'll drop in my camera target 1 to there, and I'll control drag that target tag onto the B camera, and I'll put the target 2 into that one. Now, with that done, now when I move my camera, you can see we always lock onto that position. So how I'm gonna do this is at the start of my scene, I'm gonna bring the camera over on the X, bring it down, and bring it a bit closer. So around here, and I'll add keyframes on X, Y, and Z, and then I'll go to the end of my scene and I'll position this across, up, and away. And then I'll add the keyframes again there. And let's just open up our dope sheet again and select our A camera. And we shouldn't even need to open it up, but we should just select the position keyframes by selecting position here. And let's just set them to linear. So we'll get a nice linear movement, watching our cutout happen, which looks really nice. And part way through this, I want to cut to a nice close-up. So same thing, I'm going to go to B camera, and I think my target 2 needs to be moved over just a little bit. And let's figure out where we want to cut. Maybe about here. So maybe I'll go to 75, frame 75. That's where I want my B camera to start moving. So I'll go X, Y, Z. Sometimes I say Z just so naturally, I don't know why. I think probably from watching a lot of American tutorials. But then let's go forward and figure out where we want this to stop. Maybe 128, maybe even a bit, maybe not as far as that. Let's go to 125 and let's actually figure out the positioning we want. Maybe something like this. We didn't actually adjust the one at the start, so let's go back to the start and bring this one maybe closer in. And let's try figure out, let's make sure we set our keyframes to linear as well on this one. So B camera, position, linear. And let's figure out how this looks. So we'll hit play. And let's see how this looks. So I think I don't actually want this to move out too much. I want it to stay nice and close. So I'm going to bring this back in a bit. So that we don't move too far. I think, yeah, this kind of level looks nice. Let's just make sure that it looks okay. Yeah, I think that looks nice. And what we can do to cut back and forth from these is using something called a stage object. So if we hit Shift C and search stage, we have this stage object, which I'll drop into my camera section. And what we can do is in this object tab, we can control which cameras are currently being used. So right now we want our A camera to be used, so we could drop that into there, add a keyframe, so that's at the start, and then we can go forward to what frame was it that we started moving on B. So frame 75. So we could go to our stage object and drop in the B camera there, add a keyframe on 75. So now that should switch. You can see now that's working. And then we finished our movement on 125. So we could go back to our stage object and drop our A camera back in. So we can hit play now. We can see how this looks. And I think this is looking really nice. I'm quite pleased with this. Now, I didn't add the depth of field, so let's get to a nice shot on our B camera around here. Let's see how this is looking up close. And you can see it is quite a close-up. I think I'd like to see a little bit more up here. So maybe I'll grab the camera target 2 and up the Y position a little bit. Not too much, but I think this looks nice just so we can see more of what's already happened. And then what we could do in our B camera, I'll go to optical and let's turn on bokeh. And then with the eyedrop on this focal distance, on this focus distance, we can just tap somewhere, maybe around here, and then drop down our aperture. If you turn it down quite low, you'll really see we're focusing kind of on this distance. So we can play around with its aperture until we're happy. We don't want it to be too tight of a focus. I just kind of want it to draw more attention to this close area. I think it's adds some nice realism. I think, how's 2 look? Yeah, I think this doesn't look too bad. And it should look okay for the duration of this part of the sequence. So I think I'm quite happy with that. So I believe that is everything done for this sequence. You should be ready to go ahead and render. Now, for my render settings, I think ideally it would be good to render out at 4K. It will be super clean. But if you can't do 4K, I think 1440 is not too bad as well. And for my Redshift render settings, I currently have 800 on the progressive passes and a 0.01 on the threshold. I'm using OptiX denoising. I do prefer auto single, but I seem to be having a lot of crashes at the moment when I use it. So OptiX is my current choice. But again, depending on your system, you might need to play around with these. If you want to up these, you absolutely can. I'm just kind of trying to find something that doesn't take a crazy amount of time to render. But yeah, feel free to copy what I've got. And then once you've picked where you want it to render out to, you can go ahead and add that to your render queue. And something important to do is when you're rendering out, make sure that your camera that's selected here is set to stage object. Otherwise, you're just going to render out your current camera you have selected and not have the cuts happening in between. So hopefully, if you followed along exactly as I have with this tutorial, you've managed to get something similar to me, or if you've taken it in your own direction, I hope you're happy with your results. Feel free to send me your final results. I'd love to see how you guys get on, but that will conclude this month's tutorial. Thank you so much for tuning in this month. I've had a lot of fun making this one. Although I had to re-record it, it wasn't too much stress, and I'm happy I've got it done and finished. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching this month's tutorial, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.